so excited to be here to have this conversation. This is a juicy topic that we're going to dive into. And what we're really talking about today is upgrading your life and business and creating this higher reality for yourself through learning how to master your emotions. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ali Sievewright. I am a holistic business coach, an authentic selling specialist, and intuitive. And I'm also the founder of the Selling from Your Soul Abundance Academy, where I help other healers, coaches, and wellness-based entrepreneurs to create magnetic marketing and an authentic sales path that really helps them to easily inspire those social media followers to become paid clients without all the hustle. And so today, my guest is Ashley Rainsbarger. And Ashley is a personal coach for high-level entrepreneurs who want to create more joy, more impact, more income by increasing their EQ, or their emotional quotient. And so Ashley and I connected through really the online space. I'm not really even sure how. I somehow found her, or she found me. I don't remember, but we somehow got connected, I think through Instagram. And I immediately felt drawn to her messages. And, I think that the things that she talks about are incredibly important in the business and coaching world, that just don't get enough attention or don't get talked about enough, but are so critical in order to really build that thriving business and really create the life and business that you want. And so I wanted to have her in here. She had me in her group last week. And so I really wanted to have her in here to, bring her wisdom and energy to this space, because I know how much you guys are going to love her and the things she has to say. So welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. I appreciate you. This is an amazing group, and you've been so amazing to connect with, and I just appreciate you having me in here. Thank you.
Awesome. You are so welcome. So let's start off. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and, what brought you to the work that you are doing today.
Yeah. Oh, where do I start?
Yeah, exactly. I know it's so hard.
It's such a hard place to start. Well, it's important to know that I had kind of a hard background. Grew up around a lot of addiction, a lot of poverty, abuse. My parents were alcoholics and not in a great relationship. And I remember being young and just thinking, man, I don't want to have that kind of life. I don't want to be like that. And at the time, I really thought like my escape from that kind of upbringing was going to be education, right? So even though I didn't have a whole lot of encouragement, and I didn't have a whole lot of, my parents had their issues. They still loved me. They wanted me to do well, but really nobody really expected me to go to college. I don't think nobody expected me to, really even it would have been okay if I didn't graduate high school, but I went on to, get a great job out of college. I went on to end up getting my master's degree in English pedagogy. And, I worked some corporate jobs, and I did the mom thing, and, I did all those things. And I really ended up, despite having a lot of emotional issues and suffering from depression and anxiety myself because of all the things that I dealt with as a child, I did pretty well for myself. I managed to get an education. I married a man who loved and respected me, had 3 wonderful children, got jobs people wanted to get. And I still just really just felt like I wasn't, I got everything I thought I was supposed to get, and I didn't feel really happy. I didn't feel like I was doing something that really made an impact.
Yeah. And that's so relatable. I think so.
Yeah, it's so related. Isn't that kind of how we all kind of end up here? Yep. And I remember I had like 3 or 4 different corporate jobs. I did end up becoming a teacher, because I thought, well, that'll be better. That'll make more of a difference. And I really enjoy working with children. I ended up being a high school teacher, but it's still very limiting as far as income and leadership and just the things that, create a freedom. Right. And so I still felt just really unhappy. And I remember I was listening to, a book called You Are a Badass by Jensen Chero. I think that's a popular one in the personal development space. And I remember I was like, maybe this book will save me. Maybe it'll like give me the answer to life, and I'll like finally figure out what to do with myself. And it didn't. I had to go through a lot from there. But one thing that it really did, sit with me was that, if you want something to change in your life, you've got to make the decision to change it. You've got to start. You've got to move in that direction. And it really, for the first time, it occurred to me, like, I just had been kind of a victim to everything that had happened to me. And I wasn't really taking responsibility for what I could change. Not that it would be easy, not that it would just lay out in front of me, but I needed to make a choice to move in a different direction. And she had also talked a lot about coaching in that book. And I just thought, I'd been through a lot, and I still ended up with a pretty great life. So I'd probably be a good life coach. And I ended up getting like a dual certification there. And, that brought me into the coaching industry. Eventually I was introduced to energy healing, and I became a Reiki master. So I've done kind of all the things: the mindset coaching, the health coaching, the life coaching, the energy coaching, and incorporated all those things into what I do now, which is really, emotional intelligence, emotional resiliency for entrepreneurs and other professionals.
So, I think that you've said a lot of really important key things here. And it's really, that I just want to kind of touch on and expand on a little bit more, and then kind of get into where you are now. But I think that, taking the responsibility, right, being the key, making the decision. When you make the decision that you are going to change something that you don't like, and you really own that responsibility for where it is that you are, then that's really where you're taking your power back. Right? Because a lot of times we feel like things are out of our control, and we tend to focus on the things that we don't have, or what's going wrong, or what's out of our control, or, what's stopping me. Right. And what I find in just speaking to entrepreneurs here who want to create success, the more radical responsibility that you can take for where you are, in who you're being, and in your emotional resilience, and in really every aspect of who you're being, and, not wait for something else outside of yourself to change or to make it happen, but really for you to be able to take that responsibility and take the control and the power back. That I find to be so empowering, because when you're in control, you don't have to depend on something outside of yourself to make shit happen, essentially. And that's one of the things I love about life coaching too, because a lot of times people will say, well, what's the difference between life coaching and therapy? Because sometimes it feels like there's a blend, and there's a lot of differences, and we don't have to talk about all of those, but life coaching really is about, taking the power back and the control of, okay, what can I do now to move forward? Where are my goals moving forward? Whereas therapy is more of an exploration of the past, which is important. We need to understand that as well. But I love that was kind of your turning point when you decided, because I really believe that when you make that decision, then you back that up with action, and you back that up with thoughts and an energetic state that supports that decision, that's when we really become unstoppable.
Absolutely. It really comes down to, and I think this is, what emotional intelligence is all about, is no matter what you're struggling with, you may have very limited options. It may be options that you don't want to choose from. And that's often where we get really stuck, because we're like, well, I don't want to move in this direction. I don't want to move in this direction. But when you take that leap and decide, like, if I choose this thing, it's going to get me closer to the next thing, and making that decision, like deciding no matter what happens, this is the direction I'm moving in. There's a very, there's doors that open up for you. There's energetic doors that just open up, and you start to see like new possibilities you haven't been able to see before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like, I always feel like if you give your mind the option to, like, and I don't want to say fail, it's not the right word, but to not do the thing, or well, it might work, or I'll try. I'll try is a very kind of half-assed way of looking at things, because you're sort of one foot in, one foot out. You're giving your mind the out, right? You're giving them out, your mind, and out. And when you're kind of half-ass committed like that to your goals, you're going to get a half-ass result.
You've already decided that it's not going to happen.
Right. And that's a decision.
Yeah. And that's a decision whether you're consciously making it or not.
Yes.
And we have to remember too.
That's an aha, isn't it? That you're always making a decision. You're
always making a decision, whether you're allowing yourself to be more and that's where empowerment comes in, when you decide to make a conscious decision rather than following subconscious patterns of behavior and subconscious decisions. And we have to remember, like, when we think about like creating success, like understanding it takes several failures to be successful. So in order to build emotional resiliency or emotional intelligence, understanding that there will be mistakes, there will be failures, there will be things that happen that feel like a challenge, that feel uncomfortable, that feel like a setback. The more we can expect those things and embrace those things as a part of the journey, the easier it is to be like, okay, like I knew that was going to happen. I'm going to regroup and I'm going to keep going. And
to learn from those things, to reflect on
learning opportunities.
Those things. Yeah, exactly. So let's go back a little bit. So you got the life coach certification, you started coaching. How did I know that you talk about working with high level entrepreneurs, and you said something the other day. I don't remember where you said it, but I think it was on Instagram or a training I heard that really struck me, because I think a lot of people think a high level entrepreneur is somebody who has already made it. They're making all kinds of money. They're already there. And that's not really what a high level entrepreneur is. And I would love for you to explain that a little bit. And then, we can talk then, more about how you stumbled on how emotional intelligence kind of plays into all of that, and, why you believe that's something that is just so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what people do tend to think. And that's something that I had to wrestle with for a long time before I gave myself permission to say that I work with high level entrepreneurs. People do like associate success with money, or they associate like a high level, whatever that means, with money. But when I'm talking about being a high level person, a high level entrepreneur, a high level professional, what I mean, typically my clients do have consistent income. I've made that a priority to work with people who already have like the foundation figured out, because it just makes it easier for us to do that work together when we're not struggling with the foundation. So I've made that decision, but it doesn't mean that they're making any kind of crazy amount of money. There's a variety of types of clients in various different places that I've worked with. What I mean when I say high level, and I think what truly successful people mean when they think of like a high level person, it's really somebody who is driven by their mission and their values in their business. If we're just kind of like half-assing things, or we're just kind of like winging it, or we're just kind of, and there's an aspect of, winging it. I love to wing most things in my life, but if we're doing it kind of blindly, and we're not really doing it for a deeper purpose, and we're not really guiding ourselves by like our core values, then we don't really end up in any place that we want to go. When I think, I have my values over here on my wall, and they are trust. So I trust in myself, like I can create it, trust in others to either support me or just be on their way. I don't have to spend energy with that, and trust in my higher power to open open doors for me on the way. So that, as an example of one of my values, when I'm struggling with something, my other two values are integrity and freedom, always creating simplicity and freedom in my business. When I'm struggling with something in my business, and I'm trying to make a decision, or I notice that I'm falling into a sabotaging pattern of behavior, I can look at those values that I have clearly posted on my wall, things that guide me. And I can say, like, this thing that I'm doing, or this thing that I want to do, does it align with my values? Does it align with who I am and the vision that I'm trying to create in my business? And allowing that to guide you, allowing that to be like, I don't have to sit here and emotionally spin in a million circles, because all I have to do is look at my wall. And I know, like, no, that thing that I've been doing, that way that I've been sabotaging myself, that's not really me. Why do I keep doing that? Let's let that go. And that's a big part of emotional intelligence, being driven by something, by the things that you care about, being driven by the values that mean the most to you, as far as you and the people that you're leading.
Amazing. And that's really how we create a business that is a true reflection of who we are. That's an authentic expression of who we are and the life that we want. That is in alignment. A lot of times we talk about, is that in is that in alignment? Well, what does that really mean? Well, these are the things that means, right? Is really being intentional about, who am I when I am really acting from the space of my most authentic self, my highest self, versus that fear-based version of myself that is acting from the programming, the societal conditioning, the familial conditioning, the experiences, the traumas, all that stuff, and making that choice to act from your most authentic self, which is really who you are at the core, without all of those things.
Exactly.
And I love that, because it allows you to just ground into certainty, and it gives you that structure of, this is who I am. And when I'm not in align with this, this is how it feels like. So can you give us some examples of how that shows up with your clients when they're not acting in alignment with their core values or themselves? How does that, what are examples of what that looks like in your business?
Yeah, definitely. So let's say I have one client right now. And part of the reason that she came to work with me was because she noticed herself like getting really overwhelmed with just specific tasks that she had to do in her business. It wasn't that it was hard. It wasn't that she didn't know how to do it, but there was something about her sitting down, spending that intentional time with these things that just took a little more time, because she was just really starting to build momentum. There was like this emotional thing that would happen where she would end up feeling overwhelmed and just leave it and not return to it. And so we really had to, part of doing, mindset work or emotional intelligence work is really getting logical about exactly what is happening. Where are you behaving in a way that doesn't actually align with who you are? And for her, what was happening was, every time she sat down to do this thing, she's struggled with like putting clearly down on paper who she is and who she helps, even though it's really clear when she talks about it. For whatever reason, when she's sitting down to apply for something like a speaking gig, or she's sitting down to write a piece of content that she's going to put out in her marketing, there's this story that kind of starts in her head that like, oh, well, you're not really good enough for that thing. They're not going to pick you. You're probably going to get a no. You're not making progress fast enough, right? Like there's all these stories that become triggered the moment you sit down to do the thing that you said you wanted to do. So once we're able to like identify specifically what's happening, when it's happening, like what's triggering it, and then also like the stories that she's making up about why she can't finish that task, then we're able to really talk about whether or not those stories are actually true. Because the mind is always going to tell you, you're not good enough. You can't do this. It's not happening faster. You should have made more progress. But if you sit down and look at it and you talk about, well, look at the things that you have done. Look at the speaking gigs you've already like killed, like did a really amazing job. But look at the clients you've already had, right? And so like reminding yourself in a logical way, Yes, you're amazing. You have proof that you're amazing. This is just a story that's reoccurring, that's becoming triggered when you sit down to do this thing that you've been avoiding. We can take time to ask ourselves, what do I need? Do I need a 5-minute break? Do I need to lessen the distractions on my phone? Just those very simple logistical things. Do I need to, allow myself a longer lunch break, whatever the thing is, but then allowing ourselves to just simply be uncomfortable and then finish the task. I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. We have a hard time, especially I think I relate to like being a spiritual entrepreneur, having a hard time being really like uncomfortable with something. And I think sometimes like I made that mean that, oh, well, this isn't what I'm supposed to do. If this is so hard for me, if this is so uncomfortable, then it must be something that I'm not supposed to do. But it's not actually true. The only reason that it's uncomfortable is because there's a part of you that thinks, I can't do this, so I'm not good enough for this, or this isn't for me.
Well, and that's just it. Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely does, because it just shows sort of this domino effect of how, the thoughts and then in the beliefs that create the emotions of overwhelm or confusion or, or lack of confidence or whatever it may be, impacts the result. Because when you because you're either going to not do the thing, right? It's going to hold you back from taking the actual action, which of course is going to impact your results if you don't take the action, or you're going to take the action from this uncertain, kind of unconfident, scattered space, which can impact the results as well. But the thing that you bring up that's so important, and people ask me this all the time, and I'm curious about, your thoughts around this. It's like, how do I know the difference between this doesn't feel good because this is out of alignment, it goes against my core beliefs, this isn't how I want to do business, like this isn't for me, like you were saying. And no, I'm feeling resistance here because I'm uncomfortable, or because this is an area where I need to explore and look at where there's an opportunity for growth. Like knowing the difference, because I know you and I have talked about this before, where there's this dialogue around, well, if it doesn't feel aligned, it isn't right for you. Mm-hmm. Well, does it not feel aligned because you're, again, acting from that survival self and you're afraid of something, whether it's judgment or it's the conditioning or what you've been taught or what you think you should be doing? Or does it not feel aligned because it's just goes against my core beliefs, or I'm not supposed to be doing that right now? How do we distinguish that? Or how do you distinguish that or teach your clients kind of that difference?
I think it goes, and I think you brought up an important thing too, as far as it's the only difference between creating what you want or creating a pattern of sabotage and creating a pattern of success is just that empowered thought. Because you probably relate to like clients coming to you and just wanting you to like remove the fear. Like, can we just heal the fear? Can we just, because if I wasn't afraid,
it doesn't,
and it would be easy for me, right? But it's not about healing the fear. Part of healing the fear, and you do heal it in the process, but part of healing the fear is not just meditation and doing chakra work and all that kind of stuff. It is taking the action. Part of healing the fear is taking the action, showing yourself that you're not going to die when you do the work, when you do the thing that you're afraid of. So if you want to get really real about like, is this something that I'm not truly aligned with, or is it just something that I'm afraid of, right? Like that I'm just scared to do it because I think that I'm not ready or whatever. I think it really comes down to like simply like asking yourself, is this what I want? Do I, if we did remove the fear from the situation, do I want to be a speaker at the event? Is that what I want to do? And if it is something that you want, you have to get really real about, okay, then the only reason you're not doing it is because you're letting the fear get in the way.
Yeah, that's the question that I always ask. Yeah. If fear were not present, if I wasn't afraid in any way, and that weren't, what would I do?
Yeah.
And I have used that question for major life changes, like, right, to, little decisions. Do I want to offer that product? Do I want to, whatever. It's such a powerful one and such a telling one. And the other one that I'll sometimes ask is like, if success were guaranteed, would I want to move forward with this, or is there anything else holding us back? Because sometimes it isn't, it's very telling in that, is it fear of moving forward that's actually holding you back? Or are you just like, I'm not into this?
Yeah.
There's a difference. And it's really important to know that difference. So I love that we're having this conversation, because I think this is huge.
And part of this too is like remembering, like, part of the foundational work is getting really clear about like, what are my values? What are like the top 3 values that I want to live and work by in my life and my business? Because then you have that measuring tool. Then you know, like, is it aligned with those things?
And you have boundaries.
Yes, boundaries.
Like it becomes a black and white. Like it doesn't become this whole big dramatic production. It's, here are the boundaries. Do these line up with the boundaries that I have set for myself of how I want to conduct myself in life and business? And do they align? If they do, great. If they don't, like, I don't have to think about it anymore. I've set those boundaries.
Yes. And we
I've already decided ahead of time.
Yeah. Boundaries aren't just for other people. They are for yourself, right? Boundaries are nothing more than the difference, a line between what you want and what you don't want. That's all they are. And we have to not only have them with other people, which seems pretty obvious, you have to set boundaries within yourself. I know that I need boundaries, or I would just eat cake all day long, and I would just watch Netflix, and I would, I would do a lot of things that felt good in the moment that didn't serve me later. So we have to use those values as our boundaries.
So 100%. Now, where do we begin? How do we even begin? If I'm somebody who's just like stuck, and I feel stuck in various different places, because sometimes we can kind of look at just the overall, I just feel stuck.
Yeah. Everything's stuck.
Where do we even begin to kind of see, what's driving the bus here, or where do we start? I guess.
One question I really love to, and I do this on almost every single coaching call, and especially like if they're feeling like I just feel blah today, but I don't know why, right? Like I don't know, I can't exactly explain where I'm stuck. A really good question to ask yourself is like, what is it that I specifically want to be experiencing right now that I'm not? Because it's really easy to figure out.
Really good at knowing what we don't want and focusing on what we don't want.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, well, what do we want? We have a hard time asking ourselves, what do I desire?
Yeah. And you know why? Because we are just so trained to feel shame and to feel guilt for the things that we want, because often those things that we want have to do with money, have to do with success, have to do with sex, have to do with all the different things that are pleasurable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time and energy focused on all the things we're not experiencing. And the reason we're experiencing all these things we don't want to be experiencing is because we feel too much guilt and too much shame focusing on what we do want to be experiencing. And I think we also think that, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there.
This is such a powerful conversation.
Yeah, it really is. It can go so many places.
I have so many things that are just like you hitting on the shame and the guilt around having what it is that we desire versus just normalizing it. Like I desire that. And not only is that okay, like that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And understanding like that is what most of us really start out with, a simple desire, which is to do something that is helpful, to do something that means something, to do something that is impactful for other people. We start out with that desire. And so part of like healing that shame and healing that guilt is recognizing and understanding that you being the best version of you, you spending that time and that focus, that energy, that money on you, that is what allows you to be and to give the most that you can give in whatever areas you desire to give it.
Exactly, 100%. You know, when powerful, conscious women have financial resources, the things that we can do not only in our own personal life and for our family, but you know, for our society, I mean, are endless. And I think it's really interesting because when we think about the initial driving factor, which doesn't have any guilt or shame around it, which is that we just want to be able to, you know, be in our purpose and give and serve and, you know, do our life's work, right? There's no selfishness around that because we're serving, right? But when it comes to receiving, so I desire to serve and to help and to impact, but I also desire to receive, right? And to live, you know, an extraordinary life, right? And the minute we start to think about that, if our vibration moves into any area of shame or guilt because of the conditioning that we have around, you know, our worthiness, maybe, that blocks our ability to receive when we have those emotions of shame and guilt that are associated with us receiving pleasure, you know, in all ways, right? And so I think that just becoming conscious, just even starting to become aware that there's this association there, and how can you begin to put yourself in situations that do bring you more pleasure, and being willing to kind of explore that connection there. I know for me, that was a really, really big thing, was shame and like, am I a good enough person? And even sometimes connecting, you know, wrongdoings and things like that. Like, do I deserve to receive?
Yeah, absolutely.
And doing that kind of work.
I think we have to understand, in order to receive more, in order to be that person, we have to be a person who practices receiving. You know, a lot of times we want to just be good at the thing, right? Like we want to somehow be good at the thing without doing it. Like we want to just have the money without having to do the thing that gets the money, right? We want to have the successful business without doing the uncomfortable things to get that. And spiritual entrepreneurs understand that everything is made of energy. Everything has a yin and a yang. Everything is flow, right? So it's not, if you're only giving and you're not receiving, then there's not an energetic flow. There's not, you're just draining yourself. You're not replenishing yourself. Right. So in order to receive more, you really just have to get into the simple practice of asking yourself, how can I begin the practice of that right now? How can I receive more from my spouse? How can I receive from my children? How can I receive in small ways from my business? What does that look like? What are the things, how can I, even just really simple things like receiving compliments? Right. How many times, you know, when somebody says, oh, I really love that dress, or your hair looks great today, or you're like, oh, no, it's just like an old dress or whatever. All the time. Like, well, what if you just said, thank you? I appreciate that, right? What if you just practiced receiving that? When you see like a penny on the ground, or you see like an opportunity to just, you know, somebody does tell you, thank you so much for all the work that you've done with me. You really just being in the practice moment to moment of receiving. And part of receiving too is being grateful, is being appreciative of what has been just given to you, because that truly is the energy from which we are able to receive more, from which we are able to create more. I always say, like, why in the world would the universe give us more? if we are not in full gratitude and full appreciation for what we already have. You don't have room for more. There's no room for more if you're complaining and groaning and staying in victimhood and being upset about the way that things are all the time. And I'm saying that as a person who has done the exact same thing.
Of course.
There's no room for that. In order to create room for that, you have to get really good at receiving and be grateful and appreciative of everything that is already really wonderful, and taking the time to look at that.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, you talk about creating a higher reality in business and in life through emotional resilience. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? And how can we start doing that? How can we start creating that higher reality?
Yeah, I think creating a higher level reality means starting to embody what it means to be a higher level version of yourself. So this really has to do with, you can relate it to just, we're always, as spiritual entrepreneurs, we're always talking about the highest self or the higher self and stepping into that version of yourself. It's not about, you said something earlier about, how we often will get really wrapped up in the big vision, like the money that I want to have one day, the speaking events, the clients, like the success. But in order to get to that big vision, we have to be willing to slow down and take one step at a time, take one day at a time, take one moment at a time. So in order to create a higher level reality, we have to be a person who is willing to intuitively tap into what is the best decision that I can make for myself right now. What are the best choices that I can make today? And understanding that sometimes that choice is reaching out to a potential client, even though that feels really scary. And sometimes that choice is making the choice to slow down, to rest, to do nothing today, because that is what you know that you need. But it has to be like a willingness to slow down and intuitively tap into what it is that you want to create today.
And the other thing that comes to me, which I know that we've talked about, is being willing to make those decisions, not from the mindset and space and person that you are now, but from that future version of yourself who has already stepped into the vision that you want to create for yourself. How would that version of yourself show up right now? Yeah. What would she decide to do? When you're not wanting to get on the coaching call or not wanting to do the whatever, well, how would that future version who has created the thing and done the thing and whatever, what would she say to you about getting on that coaching call right now?
Exactly. It really is one of the questions I think is so helpful to ask yourself in the moment. And often we just won't do this. We will avoid the question, especially when we're deep in sabotage, because we know if we ask ourselves this question, we don't want to be faced with the truth of it. So you have to be willing to ask yourselves these questions, even though you don't like the answers. But part of stepping out of self-sabotage and living into that higher version of yourself, living into that higher reality, is asking yourself exactly what you just said. If I was the best version of myself, what would she decide to do? How would she spend this time? Because that's ultimately the decision that you really want to be making.
Right. And, and the idea that the thought patterns and the habits and the conditioning and the version of yourself that got you to where you are today isn't going to be the same version that's going to get you to where you've never gone before.
Yeah.
And so as you're evolving, you're creating and stepping into this new reality. Your reality is evolving. It first, of course, starts with your vision of what you want that reality to look like, right? Yeah. And then checking in with yourself is, am I reacting? Am I responding in a way that is congruent with that vision, right?
Yes, exactly. And there is no there's no play by play. There's nobody that's going to give you like exact instructions. Like there's no there's no way to know that it's all going to work out, right? We have to kind of like let go of that, that mentality that like, well, if I knew that it wasn't going to work out, that I wouldn't do it. That's like not the point. The point is that you're not just here for the outcome. We're here for the journey. We're here for the challenge. We're here to be uncomfortable in healthy ways and see how that expands us, see how that like allows us to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's also like a misconception because of the way that social media works and because people are, so very often showing their best face forward. And so we often see success and we see the glory, we don't see the story. We don't see the resilience. We don't see the blood, sweat, and tears. We don't see the fears of judgment and criticism and the courage that it took for that person to move through. And I know it's very important for me and you as a coach to just really be real and authentic about what it takes, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that you have, and I have talked about this. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your thoughts on this, but this idea that there's this fine line between giving yourself grace and going easy on yourself and nurturing yourself and taking time off and coddling yourself, where sometimes you got to give yourself that tough love.
Mm-hmm. We have to remember that too much self-care is actually self-sabotage.
It can be.
Right. So, and I'm a Taurus. So like, I'm all about the self-care. I'm all about like the comfort. I'm all about like being slow and that kind of thing. But we have to we have to be careful that if like we're doing that too often and it's like getting in the way of the progress that we want to be making, then it's not actually, again, like serving your goals. Now we have to be like realistic, like it's all about like being honest with yourself about what you're capable of right now, all the different things that you have going on in your life right now. What is it that you want to take on? There's no reason to go into this like all or nothing attitude. Be realistic about what you want to do, but set those goals. And unless something completely out of your control comes up that needs attention, do the things that you said you would do to reach those goals. Challenge yourself, even if it's in like a small way every day, so that you're allowing yourself to practice being uncomfortable and showing yourself that you can do it. It's really a muscle that you have to build.
It is. And you build your confidence as you're doing, like you said, and sometimes, we talk about setting goals that are realistic and things like this, because, you don't want to set a goal to have a 50K month when,
right.
you haven't even built your audience yet, and whatever, you know what I mean? So yes, we have to be realistic in that way, but challenging enough that you are going to push yourself.
Yeah.
Don't make it so cushy that it's like, all I have to do this week is one thing and I'm good. Well, is that really going to get you where you want to be? Maybe it is, maybe, and we all have different goals. I mean, that's the other thing. Right. Not everybody has dreams of having multi-million-dollar businesses and full teams of,
No. Too much for me.
Too much for me. No, thank you.
Yeah.
But my point is we all have different goals. And everything is relative, but within, the context of what your goals are, that would be, stretch goals that would actually make a difference in your life, that would allow you to upgrade your life in some way, whatever that means to you. Like not being afraid to set the goals and to stretch yourself. And that doesn't mean hustle. And that doesn't mean, because there's a smart way to work and then there's a way to work that is full of hustle. That's not what we're talking about. But getting back to like not coddling yourself, because sometimes it's like, well, I'm just going to do this one thing this week. Well, that's fine. But is that is that going to be enough to get you where you say that you want to be? Or can we challenge you
Right.
to stretch a little bit? And then as you stretch and you hit the thing and you conquer the thing, you're like, ooh, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to ask yourself, do things feel a little too easy, a little too comfortable right now? And am I complaining that I'm not creating what I want to create? Because if you see yourself like wishing that you were further along, if you don't wish you were further along, that's totally fine. Like, take your time, do what you want to do. That's awesome.
Right.
But if you're like, no, like I want to grow, like I want to be creating more. I'm tired of the same old thing. I'm not really challenging myself. I just feel like everything is the same all the time. Then we've got to do something different. We've got to level it up a notch.
Absolutely. So one last question that I wanted to ask, and then I want you to tell people where they can find you, is where do we start? So, when it comes to having a business, we have to have a strategy, we have to have a plan of action, we have to take action, we have to do the daily things. But then there's the mindset work, the emotional work, the energetic aspects. Like, how do we know what we should be focusing on in a given season, or how do we kind of balance that out? Do you have sort of a suggestion around like a daily ritual or whatever it may be, so that you're staying on top of the working on the emotional piece while also doing the do and the other things that you need to do in your business? How do you kind of see that all fitting?
I think a couple things are just really important here. Number one, we have to continue, because it's so easy to get lost. There are so many entrepreneurs online. And I don't know about you, but I get just sick and tired of hearing all the different opinions and all the different ways that you should do this and all the different ways that you should do that. I want people to trust and get really more in tune with what they want, how they want to build their business. Now, be careful about that. Again, like talking about the self-sabotage, sometimes we want to be too comfortable. Get really honest about what you want and ask yourself if you're challenging yourself in order to create it. And, ask yourself how you want to go about that. Like, how, if I could do things my way and it would be successful, how would I choose to go about that? Right. So get really honest about what you want. And number two, what I want people, especially like in the spiritual entrepreneur community, to understand is that it's not just about thinking positive thoughts. It's not just about, constantly taking action. Part of healing so that doing these actions become easier is, yes, taking the action, being uncomfortable, challenging yourself, but also allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling. If we could just get really good, because essentially when we're avoiding action, you're not actually avoiding the action. You're avoiding the feeling you think the action is going to give you. You know that it's going to trigger something, that it's going to be uncomfortable, that you're going to be faced with a situation you haven't been faced for. And that's what we do as humans. We run away from the unknown. We run away from the challenge. We want to run away from things that are uncomfortable. Part of healing, part of making that easier is allowing yourself to really feel the feelings. Have you, when you're feeling really frustrated, literally take some time to sit quietly and just feel that frustration. When you're really, sad or feeling like you're unworthy or like things aren't moving fast enough, really sit and find that feeling physically in the body and just feel it. Part of like allowing that, because it's built up in the body. Like, we know this, energy workers know that it becomes physically built up in the body. And part of like allowing that energy to flow is allowing it to process, and allowing it to process means tapping into where it exists and feeling it so that it can move. So I would say, get really honest, try to stay as true as you can to yourself. Invest in people that want you to stay true to yourself, that want you to be connected with what it is that you want and how you want to do things. Don't trust people that say like, this way is the only way, there's no other way, you have to do it, you have to do it. Don't go down that road.
Don't get me started.
and understand that like the law of attraction is not everything, as far as like, you're not going to attract negative things if you're feeling the negative feelings. If you're truly feeling them and not just focused on the thoughts and all the bad behaviors the thoughts make you take, really feeling them and allowing them to process, so that part of you can heal. And it makes the edge like just not as sharp, and it makes it easier to move forward and do the things that you're trying to do.
I love that. So just sitting with it. And then do you recommend that people kind of sit with it and notice it, and then maybe journal about anything, that sort of came up for them around that?
Yeah, I have a whole process that I kind of
Yeah.
walk through my clients, but just to like give the brief
Cool.
version,
Yeah.
understand that like our body is so like your body is just as intelligent as your brain. And you could argue much more intelligent.
Yes, God,
Your
yes.
body like knows what's up. So we have
Mhm.
to take like time to intentionally sit with the body, feel where you're feeling that, like that depression, that anxiety, that frustration. It lives somewhere physically. Find where
Yeah.
that is. And close your eyes, get quiet, talk to it. What is it? Visualize what it looks like. Ask it, where it comes from, why it's there. Ask it how you can help it to heal. You're going to get some, just really incredible answers. And sometimes they're really simple answers, but we're just not listening to simple advice, right? We're not doing the very simple things that it takes in order to allow that energy again to move. Create a
Absolutely.
relationship with your body. Pay attention to it. It knows a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I have an energy clearing meditation around that, around getting connected with the energy of what you're holding, and just having that conversation, with that curious conversation, with where that came from and shifting that. So I am a true believer of what it is that you're talking about. So where can people find you? Can they connect with you? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, I think the very best place to connect with me right now is in my own Facebook group. It's called the Mindful Business Coach on Facebook. You can search that, or you can add me as a friend. You can find me. It should be in my links on the left. Join us in
You
there.
can drop it down.
Yeah, and I'll drop the link. Good idea.
Sure.
I'll drop the
Yeah.
link below. And we talk a lot about just emotional resiliency. We talk about energy work in business. We talk about just stepping into that higher level reality. So it's just a good place, a really grounded place. If you're tired of like all the normal business groups, like this is just a really grounded place to be.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us. This was so good. This was so good, and so valuable. And just, thank you for the work that you're doing. We need more people out there who are having these conversations around the reality in business, and supporting women, and really stepping into that version of themselves, and knowing that there's a community to do that, and a leader. And I just thank you so much for being here and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, and for all the good work that you're doing in the world. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.